As I have shared many times over the years, one of the favorite things for me about trucking was being able to share those hours of trucking with the audience of Dave Nemo in the mornings, listening to him tell stories, news stories, play music in the olden days anyway, to help pass the time away. During his show, many times, there was a caller that would call into his show that was a regular caller, and he would call into the show and quote a poem about trucks and about our industry, about truckers, about his truck, about current events in trucking, poems that he actually wrote. He would call the show, say his poem. Dave would say, "Thank you, stray dog." He would hang up, and Dave would move on to the next caller. It was a mainstay with Dave's show for many years, and his poems were not about pink hearts and puppy dogs, and they weren't like those kind of poems. I mean, they were poems that would strike a chord with all of us drivers, and I would actually turn the radio up when he was calling in so that I could hear the poem, and sometimes he would, I listened for many years, and he would say the same poem that he had said 6 months ago, but it was just as poignant as the first time that I heard it. His name was Stray Dog, a great part of American radio to us truckers, until one day we no longer heard him. He no longer called in. And radio stations don't often say what happens to callers because they don't know themselves, or they know and they don't want to be the central station for gossip or whatever. But to us truck drivers, we didn't know what happened, and Stray Dog just disappeared off of the radio station until this happened. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll tell you the rest of this story. Hello everyone, we are looking at my favorite software, a software called Trucker's Edge by DAT Solutions. We've all heard of it. If you're a dispatcher, you have, or if you're an owner-operator, you have. It's my favorite load board software. Look at all these loads I just put in Ontario, California this morning, and hundreds of loads going out of LA, going to all over the country. You can see here so many places. You can see how who the broker is in that column where it says company. That's the broker, of course. You can see here what the broker is offering. In most cases you can, or in many cases anyway. It's America's #1 software for where truckers get their loads. And as always, if you get it right here on this channel, you'll get the first month free. And I think it's a great software. I love it. I told you about it for many years when I was driving, and I'm still talking to you about it. Right here at Life After Trucking, click on the link below. Your first month free. I'm Indiana Jack. Welcome back, truck drivers. What makes this story so interesting is we truck drivers like to see a fellow truck driver be successful at something and achieve something other than what we think of as success, and that's picking up a load, driving it to the receiver, and dropping it off. And that's what Ron Witherspoon did. That's his name, by the way. Stray Dog's name was Ron Witherspoon. After his disappearance of so many months, all of a sudden Dave announced one day that on Sundays a new host was going to be hosting the show over their network. And we were excited to hear who it was. He said we would know them. Well, all of a sudden, one Sunday morning, I tuned in, as I always did, and it was none other than Stray Dog himself was given a radio show on the Dave Nemo radio network for us truck drivers. And we all thought, and I'm telling this story only from someone that doesn't have any inside information, but just a truck driver like you. He would get on the air every Sunday morning and tell trucking stories of what had happened to him, of his 30 years of truck driving. And yes, occasionally he would quote some of his poems, but mainly he would just talk to us drivers about trucking stories. All truck drivers, all we want to do is talk about truck driving. If you know a truck driver, then you know what I'm talking about. He was a different kind of a trucker than I am, and he probably wouldn't even like me if he knew me. He doesn't know me from Adam. He was more of an old school trucker and told a lot of those stories that we hear about in legends of trucking. And that's, stuff that when I came into trucking in 2007, most of that was gone. It still existed, and I'm talking about, pills that would make you stay awake all the way from New York to LA and then back to New York, all on one route. That's called a West Coast turnaround. Stories like that. But they were interesting. He had lots of stories of being on movie sets and driving trucks for movie stars and things like that were just very intriguing. But he had a hard time adapting to computers. And a radio talk show host these days has to do a lot of multitasking with a computer while they're talking, and that is not easy. And he also has to produce some of his own shows, and there's a lot to learn about being on the air as a radio host, not just sitting there and talking. So we could tell that he was having problems, and he would often joke about how his mouse wasn't steering him correctly. Things like that were funny, so we understood that he was having computer problems, but we got it. And we were saying, well, that's okay, because he's telling stories that we want to hear. After a few months went by, I would take a load specifically so Sunday mornings I could listen to Stray Dog as he was on the air. And one Sunday he said, after the show today, I'm going to go down to the TA in Nashville, which is where they were broadcasting from, and I'm going to have some breakfast with some of my friends and one of the producers. So he did that, and you will never believe what happens next. And I will finish this story right after this.
Welcome to Adventures in Trucking with Indiana Jack. I'm Randy.
And I'm Jay, and we are the Enske Brothers Racing Team from Polk City, Florida.
In the first segment of my story, when Stray Dog disappeared, causing the mystery, we didn't know what happened to him. He had medical problems and had to leave the road until one day they called him, Dave and the radio producers, and said, "Hey, you want to do a show?" Can you imagine being called by the icon of trucking radio saying, "Will you come do a show with our production company on Sunday mornings?" I mean, can you imagine that? I certainly can't. So continuing on with our story, Ron had been doing really well with his show. Then one Sunday morning, as I said, Stray Dawg went to TA with some of his buddies and one of the radio producers at the TA. And the following Sunday, he wasn't on the air. Oh man, what a letdown, because as I said, I was taking loads just to hear Stray Dawg's show. So the producer, actually management of the radio station, was doing the show that morning and said that Stray Dawg could not complete his duties as a talk show host and was not technically inclined enough to handle the radio show. And as I just said, the radio show, as well as handling the computer, producing his own show, and probably producing commercials and those kind of things. And the struggle with Stray Dawg was always, he was a truck driver, not a broadcaster. And this was a struggle with him, and he would say this in his show: "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a truck driver, not a broadcaster." But we forgave him for that because he was a truck driver. It was whispered later on that the morning at TA, at breakfast with his buddies and the producer, that he had said some off-color things and been belligerent at breakfast so that the whole restaurant could hear. And then the junior producer that was with them at breakfast came back and told the senior staff what had happened at breakfast, and that was the real reason, or a contributing reason, as to why Stray Dawg was no longer on the air. We, you and I in the audience, we will never know the truth as to why his show got yanked off the air so quick. Hush, hush. We will never know. But if Stray Dawg ever would see this, we miss you, Stray Dawg. We miss your Sunday morning show. We miss your poems about trucks, truck drivers, the American road, highways, America, and all that is good. We miss you, Stray Dawg. And thank you for that story that I was able to share with my audience who doesn't even know anything about any of this. We thank you for all of your stories that you told us on the air, even before you had your own show. Thank you, Stray Dawg.